All right, guys. We are getting everything up and running. So as soon as you jump in, let me know you are here. Elk Addict Remington on Instagram, Prime Outdoors. Liler. Cash, how you doing, bud? Scott Schmid from Facebook, hello. So we're getting a few people jumping in and joining us. So Danny Coyman, happy Wednesday. Tom, welcome. Jay Colley, how you doing? All right, YouTube's popping in. Charles Buchanan, Larry Bennett, Matthew Flowers, Brian Draper, Scott Anstein, Brian Cochran. So Hunt Dornings, those of you that are jumping in on Instagram, let me know how the audio is. I'm playing with a new attachment on that tonight. It's kind of a splitter that I can plug the charging cord into and also plug the shotgun mic in. Freddie, how you doing, bud? So just playing with this setup on Instagram so that when I go down in a couple of weeks to qualifier. So good so far. Perfect. Robert Gonzalez. Rich Sampson, a little late. Actually, we are just getting going. So you are right on time. Michael Hamilton, Josh Nordwell. So, all right. Audio is good. Antler Fins, thank you. Bobby Smith, hello. So, okay. Tonight we're going to kind of talk about some calling strategies through the different phases of the rut. We're going to kind of talk about those different phases, kind of some of the things that's happening during that time, and then, my approach during each of those. So I want to thank everybody that chimed in with suggestions. Definitely got a lot of great questions, comments, topics. So I figured tonight we would hit this one. I know several of you guys talked about solo hunting. So, next week maybe we'll dive into the solo hunting. I do have a giveaway tonight. I have one item for Facebook, one item for YouTube, and one item for Instagram. So we will cover that. Jay Colley, must say I love my ready nutrients. Thank you. Yes, always have them. So, all right. Looks like we are getting quite a few people on. Andrew Walla, Lori, hello. Colorado's in the house. Ooh, Florida. Outstanding. I love it. Mountain Tough Crew, Andy, how you doing? So, all right, let's go ahead and just jump into this because it may take all the time that Instagram's going to allow us. So, all right, hello everybody. My name is Michael Batiste. I'm from the Elk Calling Academy, and if this is your first time joining us, welcome. We're honored to have you. The way Wapiti Wednesday Q&A works is typically start with a topic, kind of talk about that topic, kind of my take, my approach on some of those things, my thoughts. At any time, it doesn't matter which platform you're on, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube. We're broadcasting all three live. Go ahead and feel free to put your questions in the comment section, and we will roll along and answer those as we can. If there are some that kind of we don't get to, we'll kind of carry those over to a future episode. So if you are enjoying the content that you're seeing, make sure that you like, subscribe, or follow, depending on which platform you're on. So here we go. Let's jump into it. So, all right. So first off, to really talk about the different phases of the rut or my calling approach, I think we need to kind of talk about what's going on during each of those phases. So, because it's kind of important, to what's going on. In fact, Josh Nordwell from YouTube put first part of September, silent elk options. So, Josh, I'm going to talk about some things that, in fact, last year on opening day here in Idaho, which was August 30th, we got into 9 different bulls. Actually, throughout that whole first weekend, we got into, 14, 16 different bulls. And I think of those bulls, we had 12 of them bugling just because of what we do. So, all right. So during that pre-rut phase, pretty much what's going on is, the bulls are breaking up from their bachelor groups and they're establishing their pecking order. They're establishing their dominance, and they're also rounding up cows. It can be that time where there's not a lot of bugling action, but you can get a lot of rutting action. And that's one thing that so many people, when they think about bugling or rutting activity, or man, those bulls were hot, they focus solely on the amount of bugling that bulls are doing. But there's still a lot of activity. And remember, a response is not necessarily a bugle back to you. A response could be a bull coming to you, a bull raking. There's a lot of different sounds that Charles Buchanan, I like it, bud. You know where I'm going with this. But there's a lot of different sounds that, because they're low audible sounds, you don't hear them from a distance, and so you don't think you're getting responses. And a lot of times that response, like I said, a bull coming to you, because we get so impatient, we want to go cover as much ground and seems how it is, and just hunting and searching for that bugle. So there's actually a lot of elk that we walk by. So, in fact, Nicholas Curry, seems like the rut is different in each state. To some extent, yes, but I've also hunted multiple states and have seen the same type of response and the same type of activity within those different states. So remember, elk are elk. It doesn't matter if they live in Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico, Washington, Oregon. Elk are elk, and elk breed, and elk are herd animals, and elk are vocal. They are a herd animal that, are vocal. They are very social. So send it outdoors. Learned this the hard way. Spooked a lot of bulls out of impatience in Utah. It happens. And, that's all part of that impatience, and being patient is all part of, really learning the game and really learning the biology and learning what's going on with the elk. So okay, pre-rut, remember, breaking up from their bachelor groups, establishing their dominance, establishing their pecking order, rounding up cows. So then you go into peak rut. Peak rut is when most of the breeding happens. You still can get some breeding happening in the pre-rut, because you will have some cows that will come in early. But peak rut is when most of the cows are bred. Then you go into post-rut, which a lot of the big herd bulls at that time break away from the group, go back into solitude, or maybe regather into their bachelor groups. The rest of the herd is kind of staging, waiting for their migration to their winter grounds. But there is still a little bit of breeding going on, because there's cows that come in late. So, K. Grant McCown, when is the best time this year to hunt the rut? Funny you should ask that, because I was studying the lunar calendar for September earlier today, and studying a couple of other things. So we're going to hold that question for a future episode, because I'm going to do a whole episode on what I think is going to be kind of the peak rut activity for this year, and based off all the stuff that I'm finding. So, Jack Keithley, so pre-rut, sound like a smaller bull? Not necessarily. Tad Sherman, how many teeth do elk have? They have two large right in the front of their mouth. They almost look like chiclets. So, peak rut is the best time to hunt rags. They are dumb as a door. So, okay, so we've kind of talked about the peak rut. It depends if they have a list. Tad, I love you. So my approach during all of these really doesn't change a whole lot in the way that I start. So the best piece of advice I ever got was, how can you write a book for a story that hasn't even happened yet? And that I kind of had to ponder on that, and really what that means is each encounter with every bull is a little bit different. There's not one cookie cutter style, there's not one cookie cutter way that is going to work with every single bull that you encounter. Each one's different, each situation's a little bit different. You know, are they a solo bull? Do they have a herd? Are they a herd bull? Are they a raghorn that's just cruising looking for cows? You know, there's a lot of different things that play into this. So, Andrew Walla, do elk breed in their summer range or between summer and winter range? Andrew, they actually breed in their breeding grounds, which is in that month of September. It's the Autumn Equinox that kind of triggers the rut. So, you know, mid to tail end of September into the first part of October. So, all right. Yeah, Robert, or if they've already got their butt kicked. So, now the reason I say my approach really doesn't change. Oh, look at that. Perpetual Wanderer. You found service in that little slice of heaven that you're living in. I love it. Welcome. So what I mean by I don't really change is I start the exact same way, whether it's day one of the season or it's the last day of the season. And basically what I've done is I've done my homework in the area that I'm hunting. Okay, I've put out trail cameras during the summer. I have taken scouting trips. I've studied maps. I have a really, really good idea of where those elk are, where they feed, where they bed, you know, their travel corridors, their morning travel corridor, their evening corridor. But basically, the way I start every morning, and again, like I said, it doesn't matter if it's day one or the last day of the season, I have a location in my mind I want to get to, and typically that location is on the fringe of a bedding area. Now, very rarely do I go back into the same place day after day. That's why I will pick spots where I can bounce around and hunt different places. That's why I like base camp in a truck, because I can easily jump into that truck and drive 25, 30 miles up the road or down the road and hit a different draw, hit a different area that I'm working different elk. The reason I do that is the longer that you can keep the elk in their normal patterns, the more chances of them being in that area and the more opportunities that you have with that group. So, okay. So, the way I start each morning, I'm usually working up the trail or working in the dark a little bit because I want to listen for some bugles in the dark. Elk are usually pretty vocal and pretty active at night. Even during the pre-rut, you can get some nighttime bugling activity because remember that first part of the season, it's pretty warm during the day. So they're going to be more active at night when you have that cooler weather. And because they're establishing that pecking order, because they're, you know, rounding up those cows, they can have that more activity in the evening. So, now as I'm moving, you know, towards the fringes of those bedding areas, I am doing location bugles. So, and remember, location bugles, they're just nice and relaxed. There's no big finish to it. It's just a nice relaxed call that's just saying, hey, where's everybody at? Now, I'm also going to pay attention to my surroundings. We've all been there. We've, you know, heard other people out there. And they just, it seems like they take 20, 25 steps and they're bugling again. Another 20, 25 steps, bugling again. So, I pace my bugles based on how thick the terrain is. So, obviously in thicker terrain, I'm going to locate more often. But as I'm kind of moving and as I'm locating, there's a few things that I'm kind of paying attention for. One, obviously, I'm listening for bugles. I'm listening you know, for something to either pipe off back to me or just crack off on their own. But the other thing I'm also doing is I'm generally trying to move with the wind in my nose, which means I'm starting at elevations, working up. So, morning thermals are coming down. So I have that in my face. The reason is a few different things. One, man, if I can smell them, then I know that they're not too far ahead of me. Or you start looking and it could have been that they came through there not too long ago and one of them had peed and you're finding fresh sign. So you're not just hiking to cover ground. You're listening, you're looking for fresh sign. You're listening because it may be you might just hear them moving and cracking sticks or moving through the brush up ahead of you. So if you're not paying attention to those things, you're not going to hear them. Now, typically a lot of times during the pre-rut time frame, we typically don't get a lot of responses back. And I've heard, a few people have commented about, elk are not vocal. They're really, really quiet. So you may not get a lot of responses back, and that's okay. So, because really what we're wanting to do is get up on the edge of those bedding areas anyway where they're going. And then we kind of break into, I guess you would call it a blind calling sequence or a silent calling routine. And what that means is because there's not a lot of bugle activity from these bulls, we break into this routine. And you guys have heard me talk about it, the breeding sequence. I will break into the breeding sequence from day one. And if you guys really want to know about the breeding sequence, if you really want to know what's in it, we've got over on our Patreon page, we've got herd bull only, which herd bull, it's $15 a month for a herd bull. You get your first month, you get your choice of an Elk Calling Academy hat or a shirt. You have herd bull only instructional videos, which is the information that I teach in the one-on-one lessons. We have 3 videos up right now that just starting through the series. We just got done with all the cow sounds. We're breaking into all the bull sounds, what they mean, how to do them. And then once we get that done, then we're breaking into the breeding sequence and everything in. But so pre-rut, you're in this blind calling, silent calling routine. And basically you're doing this breeding sequence. And what a breeding sequence is basically is that you are a breeding age bull that has a cow that is in estrus. That is the picture that you're portraying. But there certainly is a price or a pace that you have to go. Because remember, there's not a lot of elk vocalizations, going on. So you kind of have to tailor, you guys have heard me say it, match your environment, match your surroundings. And that's key. You also have to match what stage of the rut you're in. So pre-rut, I'm going to do a series of calls and then I'm going to break 2 to 3 minutes. And usually when I'm doing these breeding sequences, I have a few trees picked out that I make my way around. This is what we did 2018 season, that an hour after sunup, we had 2 bulls, the top 2 bulls on my hit list coming up the mountain bugling at us. We had gone through the area and done location bugles where they came from with not even a peep. But as soon as I got up into that travel corridor on the edge of their breeding or their bedding area and started doing this breeding sequence, these mature bulls, these breeding age bulls, recognize those tones. They recognize those sounds because these are only sounds that you will hear during September, during the rut. They know what's going on. They know the situation. They immediately know that there's a bull with a hot cow, and most breeding age bulls will want to come and scent check the air and make sure that that cow is actually an estrus and they want to try to breed her. Now, there's a few keys here that once you get that bull bugling, the mistake that a lot of people make is they immediately start engaging that bull. The only problem is as soon as you start engaging that bull, if you get too aggressive with him, especially during this pre-rut time, if he's not in that aggressive mindset, you're going to push that bull away. You're going to lose him. So one of the key things with that breeding sequence is you stay in your story. You stay in that picture that you are painting. So Josh, how far between the trees? You know, there's not a set. I mean, you know, some trees could be 10 yards apart, others could be 15, 20. It all depends on the different areas. Now, once the snow melts, and I don't know the way Mother Nature's been going lately, but once the snow melts and have the ability to get up there, I am going to film some videos for the Patreon page where you guys are going to actually see me in a setup. I'm going to show you what I look for in a setup, how I set the shooter up, and then what I do as that caller back there in this breeding sequence, so you can actually see it firsthand out there and see how I move and do everything involved in that. So Josh, there's really not a set distance on that. So now I told you kind of ignore that bull and focus on your picture. Focus on that portrait you're painting, because that's what we're doing when we're out there calling. Is we are basically painting a picture in that elk's mind of what's going on. That's why it's critical to understand their vocalizations and understand what's going on, so that you can paint the most accurate picture that there is, that you can have realism, that the sounds that you're making match what you're trying to say. So now, even though you're going to kind of ignore that bull, there's going to come a time that, you know, his aggression level is going to rise, and you will know when it's time to engage that bull. He's gonna rock you to the inner core with a bugle, and it's either going to be a challenge bugle or it's going to be an extremely sharp lip ball. That you're going to know at that point, okay, I have him to the point that now all of a sudden I can turn and I can engage him, and I can actually ramp up the aggression. Because what basically you're doing with all this is you're kind of taking the temperament, or take the temperature of Stephen. Hey there, coach. Sorry I didn't catch the topic. So Stephen, we're just talking about different calling strategies for different phases of the rut. And right now we're kind of talking about the pre-rut phase. So, all right. So you're taking that bull's temperature, because there could be times, and in my lessons, and I've done this with a couple of you guys the last couple of weeks. So one of the things that I'll do sometimes with the one-on-one lessons is I'll pull up videos and have bulls bugling, and I'll ask you guys to tell me what you're hearing. What's the mindset? What's going on? How are you going to respond back? And it's interesting because there's one bull particular that I've done the last couple of weeks that all this bull does is location bugles. And so, I mean, he's coming in, but all he's doing is location bugles. And that's where I've said that so many people kind of want to push and rush things, that, oh, that bull's bugling, I'm going to go ahead and get aggressive with him. I'm going to scream at him. And getting too aggressive too early can intimidate that bull and push him off. And it's funny because in this video, all of a sudden this bull comes walking in, and on the left, he's a gorgeous 6, but on the right, just past his 3rd, he broke off his main beam. He's a large bull that was probably a herd bull that had cows, that snapped his antler in a fight, got his butt kicked, lost his cows. And so that's one of those cases that you get too aggressive with him too fast, he's just going to go the other way. So that's where, you staying within that breeding sequence, you staying within that story can get him to elevate his game. And then as soon as you hear that elevation or that aggression level, then you can turn that aggression. So now the other thing, let me do this before I jump into the next one. We've had a lot of things rolling in here. To This last year was weird for bow season. They weren't even talking. I have a friend that rifle hunted and had bugling bulls. Yeah, this past rut for 2018 here in Idaho, they didn't even hit peak rut until third week of October. It didn't really make any sense to me because all the forecasts that I saw, but now with the winter storms that we've been having, I mean, Bogus Basin right outside of Boise has received 130 inches of snow just in February alone. So August 24th, opening on Oregon coast. Should we use more raking or cow mews? No, you can still, you can still break into this breeding sequence. So, because that's the thing with this, especially during early times, they're curious. They're going to come see what's going on. They're going to go, hey, okay, this is what we're getting ready for this time of year. So. Branch antler bulls or spikes, which is easier to call in. Not that calling elk is ever easier. Smaller branch antler bulls and spikes are pretty easy to call in. And Matthew, if I've got time tonight, I'm going to kind of hit one more thing towards the tail end that will kind of help you with that. So, Jay, what if they stay in the same spot for a few days? An elk will. A lot of times if you get in areas where there's a lot of wolves, they'll kind of be on a 2 or 3 day cycle rotation, and you kind of got to figure that out. So, Charles, when are we starting Patreon herd bull Q&A? Probably next month. I actually have a couple of more shows to get through, and then we'll start that on Thursday nights. So. And that's another advantage of being a Patreon member. We have a Patreon-only live Q&A section where I can dive into a lot of the information a little bit more. I'm going to presume that the bulls go where the cows are. Not sure, actually. Do the cows have a particular area they go to every year? For example, breeding area, and the bulls already know to head there. Yes and no. So, during the summer, your bulls are typically at higher elevations, a lot of times up above tree line. Your cows are down at lower elevations where grasses are more plush because, they're dropping calves. They need that good grass to produce milk. And that's all part of that pre-rut phase. And also where those bulls establish the pecking order, then they loop down, round up their cows, and then they push their cows to their bedding or to their breeding zone, their bedroom. Bulls will go back to the same breeding area year after year. They're comfortable with it. They know where it's at. They feel safe, so they'll go there. Do you cow call as you walk? Why or why not? Not very often. So reason being is it's just a dead giveaway of where you're at. And too many times, you're walking along, your cow calling, and here comes an elk trotting down the same trail that you're walking up, or this or that. I've just had those interactions happen too many times. So, Matthew, how far will your location bugle reach out? That really depends on how thick the terrain is. So, if it's a little more open, you could get a couple hundred yards out there. So maybe even a little bit more. In fact, that's one of the things that I want to do. Again, on another video that I'll post onto YouTube, is I'm going to get different distances away from the camera and do bugle so that you can hear how those different distances affect the bugle, and also pay attention to high note, mid note, and low note, which notes you can hear from the different distances. So, like prom week makes sense. When you talk about breeding areas, you mean from prior experience, scouting, e-scouting, or just general knowledge of the area? What about hunting a new area for the first time and no elk heard or spotted? So yeah, the bedding areas, and we've kind of talked about this in past. So when you go into a new area and you're hunting that area, this is where you really want to do your night bugling or your night listening. Because, like I said, elk a lot of times will be more vocal, they'll be more active at night. So you go into this new area, and you can go out either late at night or you can get up really early in the morning and go. But listen for bugles. You hear those bugles at night, that's feeding ground. And then you can start working to those feeding ground and then just follow those bugles. Those bugles will lead you to their bedding area. So, and what you've done right there, just on that first night and first morning, you've located feeding, morning travel corridor, and bedding area. And then you hang out around the outskirts of that bedding area, keeping the thermals in your favor. Then in the evening, and then when they roll out, now you just finished that loop. Now you just figured and found their evening travel corridor. So, okay. Now, one other thing that we will do sometimes during pre-rut, because people have said it and we know it, they're not as vocal. We will make them get excited. And the way we'll do that is, and this works best if you have a partner, if you have somebody with you. For your solo guys, sorry, this one's going to be a little tough. But what we will do is we've already established who the shooter for that day and who the caller for that day is. So the caller, we'll get to the area, we'll get set up to, where we want to do this. And the caller will start breaking into this breeding sequence. The shooter will kind of move off one direction a little bit, and they will start acting like a bull that's bugling and responding to my breeding sequence, to what I'm doing. And again, I'm going to treat him just like a bull. I'm going to ignore him and keep doing what I'm doing. Now, I'm going to ramp up that breeding sequence a little bit, because it's almost like starting a fire. Okay, you start with small kindling, then as the fire gets larger, you add larger logs to it to build that fire larger and larger. That's what you're doing with this breeding sequence. You're ramping up this excitement, you're ramping up this anticipation. Well, as I'm ramping up mine, he's responding, he's ramping up his excitement also. And by doing this back and forth, we've actually got other bulls before that have all of a sudden got interested into what's going on over here, and they've started bugling. But again, we ignore him for a little bit, and we just focus on what we're doing until his excitement level reaches a point that now we engage him. As soon as I start engaging the actual bull, my hunting partner will go silent, and then he'll slip out front in between me and that other bull to cut him off. Jeffrey Gallen, how you doing, brother? Hey, Jeff, give me a call. I need to talk to you about July and coming and staying with you. So that's another way that the two of you calling back and forth can create this excitement. And that's really what you're doing. You're creating that excitement that these bulls all of a sudden, they don't want to miss out on. They want to be a part of it. And that's what gets them bugling. That's what gets their excitement level. That's what gets their adrenaline going and raised up. So that's kind of pre-rut. You're basically creating excitement. So let's see. Killed my first bull this year with a bow using what Mike is talking about, but applied late season. Yeah, Charles basically applied this in December, and shot his first bull with a bow. So talk dirty. Bulls want a girlfriend, not a fight. Not necessarily. So, all right, now let's roll into peak rut. So obviously peak rut, there is a lot more activity because you do have cows coming into estrus. You have bulls that are battling and wanting to breed that cow. You have the herd bull that's protecting his herd. You have the satellites that are all trying to come in, and there's just a lot of commotion. Now, the one thing that we do that kind of separates us apart is that night bugling. The reason the night bugling is effective is because we already have elk located, and we are going into areas that we know there are elk. So, and it could be with the night bugling, it could be that, they really don't bugle a ton, but just enough to let us know they're there. Now, in the peak rut, it's kind of a little nicer because now, I'm still taking that same approach. I'm still starting low in the morning and working up, and I'm locating as I'm going. The only difference is now, once you get that response, now it's game on. So, and here's the other thing, real quick, guys. If you're out night bugling and you get a response, don't sit there and keep calling to the bull. You know where he's at. I've made that mistake before. Drew a pretty coveted tag here in Idaho one year, and we went out night bugling, and we ended up calling in 3 bulls to within about 50 yards of us, because it was just, there were so many bulls screaming in this area, and it was so cool, but we kept bugling, and they ended up coming in. So really, your main purpose with night bugling is just to locate. Once you have locate, you're done. Don't sit there and keep bugling. So now, okay, peak rut, we're doing the same thing. We're moving up the hill, we're gaining elevation, we're locating, we get a response. Perfect. We're going to pinpoint that where that response is, and then now all of a sudden we're going to do some quick calculating. Where's that bull at? How long is it going to take us to get over there? What time of morning is it? Are we going to get over there before the thermals change? And is he in the same spot, or is he moving? These are all things that you have to calculate real quick. A lot of times too, since it is peak rut, as you're moving towards that bull, they will continue to bugle so that you can keep tabs on him. You can keep tabs of where he's at. That is going to help you with your approach. Now, the mistake a lot of people make is they will stay low until they're under the bull and then start coming up. That's absolutely disastrous, because I can guarantee the thermals, there's a good chance the thermals will change or swirl sometime in that, and he's going to get a nose full of you. That's why we typically gain elevation as we go towards him, because we want to end up on that same plane with him, that same level. Now, the thing with this is, because we have a vocal bull, we know where he's at. Now we're going to try to move so that we're within about 125 or 150 yards of him. You don't have to get right on top of him. So, once we get that 125, 150 yards, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set my shooter up. Meaning I'm on same plane with that bull, have a pretty good idea of which direction he's going to come in. So I'm going to set my shooter up, and then I'm going to turn around and look back. And I'm going to see how far back I need to go, because what I'm trying to do is set my shooter up in that hang up spot where this bull is. Where that bull is going to come up and stop to be able to see that elk that's making noise. Then I'm going to drop back, and guess what? I break into the breeding sequence. I start telling the story. But since it's peak rut, you can actually kind of ramp it up a little bit faster. You can get into some more of the sounds a little bit quicker. So, now again, as that bull kind of starts responding to what I'm doing, and this is what's going to pace you. Now remember, pre-rut, we actually paced our call and sequences out, 2 to 3 minutes. But during peak rut, the fact that you're generally getting a response, so you can actually go and respond, or basically go into your next little paint stroke, or painting the picture. You can go into it a little sooner. You don't have to wait. But you're still going to pick the trees. You're still going to move around. You're still going to do your cow sounds, your bull vocalizations, your raking, all these things kind of mixed in. And again, you're waiting for that bull. You're taking his temperature because you're still trying to see what you're dealing with. If he never does elevate and get aggressive, you're not going to elevate and get aggressive. But as soon as he elevates and get aggressive, then you can elevate your responses and you can get aggressive back. And you can, at that point, once his aggression level really rises, then you can actually engage him and start working him. I can guarantee, guys, that if you do this, you will not push bulls away. You won't intimidate them, because the breeding sequence is not, and in fact, if you had an opportunity to really sit there and basically watch a bull that has a hot cow, watch how he acts. And it's really cool, because if you can watch him when there's no bulls around versus when there are bulls around, you'll see that his demeanor is completely different. And what I mean by that is when that bull has his cow and he's by himself, there's no other bulls pestering, his main focus is on that cow. And really, what is she doing? Really dogging her. When is she ready? But you start throwing other bulls into the mix, and now he starts getting into a defensive posture, a defensive mode. That's basically what you're doing while you're painting this picture. Now, that bull that's by himself, there could be bulls 400 or 500 yards away that are bugling, and he's not giving them the time of day because they're not close enough to be a threat. But once they get close enough and they break that bubble, his comfort bubble, that's when he's going to go on the defensive. That's when he's going to become aggressive. So backcountry e-bikes, what do you do when the bull is only chuckling? Some bulls will only chuckle. So still continue and keep doing that breeding sequence. Continue doing the same thing. I mean, we had one bull a few years ago that we nicknamed him Chuckles because that's all he would do. He would just crack off, I mean, a dozen chuckles. Boom, 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 boom. And, we just kept going. And we thought he was kind of just something wrong, just, this, not really interested. And then we finally saw him after about the third or fourth encounter. He was a pretty stud bull. Okay, so now as you can see, between pre-rut and peak rut, we really haven't changed a whole lot. The only thing that's really changed is that bull interacting with the location bugles and letting us know where he's at. So the difference, pre-rut, we're kind of doing blind calling to kind of get the party started. With peak rut, we have a bull located. And there are some times, even during peak rut, that you won't get a response, that then you just fall back into that blind calling. That you create that excitement, you create that energy. So, okay, to completely off topic, and I apologize, but I keep forgetting to ask, will you be at the Bighorn Show in Spokane? Michael Hamilton, no, I will not be at the Bighorn Show this year. So, Tim, so be a hot cow with an interested bull and keep the story going and don't challenge until he's ready, basically. In a nutshell, Tim, that's really basically about it. But the thing that we focus on more in our breeding sequence is the bull vocalizations. Okay? Because remember, cows will do their vocalizations year round. Bulls will locate bugle year round. But those sounds that are associated with that breeding sequence and associated with the rut are only done during September. Okay, I've never heard a bull glunk in the summer range. I've never heard a bull glunk in winter range in January. So that's why a lot of these sounds that we really focus on within the breeding sequence are synonymous with September and synonymous with the rut. That's why they're so effective. Now, the other question I get a lot is, am I really worried about sharing this information and having everybody else out there doing it? No, because all we're doing is acting like elk. We're acting the way their behavior is. We're acting the way their vocal patterns and speech patterns are based on that situation. So if everybody is acting like elk, are elk going to be able to know the difference between whether you're a human or you're an elk? They're not going to really be able to hear because of all the different sounds that are involved and all the different frequencies. They're not going to know. And plus, I mean, they are tuned into that breeding sequence. They're tuned into those sounds. So, seems like the bull's chuckling was pushing his cows away. What do you think? Without really knowing the whole situation on that, I mean, it's hard to say. Was he pushing them away, or was it that he was just actually heading to his, bedding area and he was chuckling to kind of keep in contact with you, saying, hey, we're just heading this way. So that's one thing that I hear a lot is people think that elk are really pushing them the other way, when in reality they're going to where they want to go, and they're being vocal back to you to just let you know where they're heading, and they're saying, hey, come with us. So good evening. What's your choice of cow calls? Which product, for instance? Open reed cow calls, I like the custom series from Native. I just really like the tones that they produce. Another one that I really like is the Trophy Wife from Rocky Mountain Hunting Calls, and the new Mini Cow Call from Phelps are pretty good. As far as a reed, last year I used the Rip It 1.5 quite a bit. This year I'm going to use the Elk Calling Academy 1.5, which, oh yeah, guys, any day they'll be available. So Matthew, I hope that kind of answers your questions about, which cow call. A while back, someone mentioned full moon on the 14th. I thought the equinox 21st and 10 days before was the time to key on. Can you explain? Okay, so Bill, the autumn equinox, which is typically the 21st or 22nd of September, right in there. The autumn equinox is what triggers the rut. Most cows are bred within a 7 to 14 day window of that autumn equinox. Now, there are several factors that play into that, whether it is early, whether the 7 to 10 days is before that autumn equinox, if the autumn equinox falls in the middle, or if the rut happens after that autumn equinox. But typically the autumn equinox, the equal amount of daylight and nighttime, is the way the light enters the pupils of the cow and all this scientific stuff, but that's what triggers the rut, okay? The upcoming winter can also have a play on the rut. 2018, we did not see really full rut activity until third week of October. Well, here we are in February getting hammered with snow, which means there's going to be snow late in the mountains. And those cows don't want to be dropping calves when there's still a bunch of snow on the ground. The calves won't survive. They don't have the grasses to produce the milk. So they can key in on that. Now, the full moon this year, I actually looked at it today, like I said, is right around that autumn equinox time. If I remember right, I'm saying the full moon about the 21st of September, which means the week after it, that full moon's going to disappear and you have a dark week right after the equinox. So, Robert, if you locate night bugling and get a response, make a note and leave. Okay. I like how you guys are having a conversation about ready nutrients. I love it. Who makes these flavors? It's ready nutrients. Okay, Jack responded. So Robert, break his zone of defense. Exactly. Have you ever used a bark to get a bull to show himself as an offensive tactic and make your call seem more legit? Bill, I've used the bark a lot, but typically I don't bark first. I want to focus on what I'm doing, and then when that bull or cow, when that elk barks, that's when I'm going to bark back. And all a bark is basically that elk saying, I'm not comfortable with the situation, you need to show yourself. Basically, by you barking back, you're kind of saying the same thing to them, that, you need to show yourself to me. So, all right, one more question, then we'll jump into post-rut. What is the best diaphragm for a beginner to start with? So, Tom, I'm going to give you 3. The reason 3 is because there's 3 different sized frames, and you need to figure out which one fits you the best. The Black Amp from Phelps Game Calls is the small, the narrow frame. The Mellow Yellow Mama from Rocky Mountain Hunting Supply, or Rocky Mountain Hunting Calls, that's your medium. And then the Rip It Red from Native by Carlton is the wide. You first need to really figure out which diaphragm fits the roof of your mouth the best. By you ordering those 3, you're going to have a narrow, a medium, and a wide. All 3 are single light latex and designed really good for beginners. But that will also really help you with fit to find the best diaphragm that works for you as far as size. Are you saying that dark week after the equinox is most likely better? So the last week of the month? I'm not ready to say that yet. I have a little bit more information, Stephen. So that's why I said we'll kind of table that conversation about the best week or what week you might want to take off for a future episode. So, oh, real quick. Okay. Our good friends at Outdoor Hunting Addiction has sent us 3 of their new silicone cups. Okay. We have 1 green, 1 orange, 1 white. So I'm just going to go through and I'm going to pick a random winner. The last thing I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to pick 1 winner from Instagram, 1 from Facebook, 1 from YouTube. So 3 of you guys are going to win one of these. So thank you to Mr. Jack at Outdoor Hunting Addiction. If you guys don't go follow his page, please go do so. He also has some new cover scents coming out, sage, pine, and earth, that look really, really cool. So, all right, post-rut. Now, post-rut really is going to kind of fall back into the same approach as pre-rut. Your bugle activity, your vocalizations, and all that really start kind of winding down a little bit. But the thing with the thing with that post-rut, what's kind of interesting is because you can get some days that are kind of like pre-rut, and you can get other days that feel like peak rut, because of with everything going on, because you still have some late breeding action going on. So you're still going to do the same approach. You're going to start in the morning. You're going to locate. If you get a response, then you're going to move in on the response, set up, do the breeding sequence, and engage that bull when you know the time is right. If you don't get responses, then you're going to get to areas that you find fresh sign or on the edge of bedding areas, and you're going to break into the breeding sequence in that blind calling or silent calling type approach. So that's why post-rut sometimes can be really, really interesting, because not only does it change from day to day, but sometimes it can change within that day. Meaning you could have a pretty quiet morning, but then all of a sudden the evening time is just insane with bugles and elk activity. So it's just funny how that can kind of switch really quick. Now, the one thing I talked about, or brought up earlier, somebody asked about small raghorns or spike. If you just want to go out and shoot any elk, you don't care if it's a cow, a spike, a small bull, you just want an elk. The best piece of advice I can give you, and the easiest thing to do, is get into an area where you find fresh sign, okay? So you're moving along, you're doing some location bugles, and you come across some fresh sign. You come across fresh tracks, fresh pea spots. You can smell them. The droppings are still green. They were just there. Figure out the wind, find the thermals, and if there's a trail right there, get on the downwind side of the trail. Knock an arrow, and then all you're going to do, 2, 3, 4 soft cow calls, then you're going to wait 5 minutes, then you're going to repeat that again. Stay in that same place for an hour. Constantly be scanning the woods around you. Elk are curious. This is a new voice. You're doing something that's non-threatening, but their curiosity, they're going to want to come see who this new cow is. Who's making this noise? Who just came into our area? I don't recognize that voice. We've had it happen time and time again, even during the middle of the day. This is what we do during the middle of the day a lot of times when elk have gone to bed. So we'll let them go to bed for a couple of hours, then we'll do this hour sequence during the middle of the day. If nothing comes in an hour, get up and keep following those tracks until eventually you get on the edge of the bedding area, and then set up and just do these 2, 3, 4 soft cow calls, wait 5 minutes, do it again. But the key is you have to have an arrow knocked, and you have to constantly be scanning around and looking. This is exactly the technique that Charles did in December. Went out 2 times. The first morning he did this, he was only in this routine for 15, 20 minutes, and he actually had a a large bull coming in from one direction and 3 or 4 cows coming from the other. He just kind of got a little impatient and wanted to kind of push the issue, and they blew out. Went back out on the next trip, was in this sequence about 15-20 minutes again. A bull cracked off a bugle, came running in and stopped broadside at 20 yards for him to get his first bull with a bow. So, all right. A coworker of mine says there's basically 2 breeding cycles. The first go around, things slow down, then the late cows to come in to heat get bred the second round. Would you agree? So, okay, so Stephen, when a cow comes into cycle, she's only in that estrus cycle for around 12 to 14 hours. If she's not bred, she falls out of estrus, and 14 to 21 days later, she comes back in again. Cows can have up to 3 cycles a year, but bulls are pretty dang good at what they do. That's why most cows are bred in the first cycle, and then in the post-rut, you have that second cycle cows that get bred the second time around. So, hope that answers that question. Hunt Dornings, do you ever do lost calf sounds? Sometimes I will. Sometimes during that midday routine, when I know that a bull has gotten up, that he's done clearing the contents of his stomach and he's up moving around, there's times that I will slip in about 125, 150 yards from that breeding or from that bedding area where they're bedded down, and I will do lost calf sounds, lost, distressed calf, kind of playing on that maternal instinct of the cows. And I'm trying to pull those cows out of the bedding area because really during that rut time frame, if those cows come, the bull's going to come. But what happens sometimes is that bull, he's so protective of the elk in his herd that sometimes he will be the first one out to see what's going on with that calf. Is there a predator that's trying to harm that calf? Is that calf lost? And that bull just basically wants to protect his calf and get his calf and get his cows and group back together. So, Matthew, let's hear a challenge bugle or lip ball. Okay. So, challenge. And then lip ball. Okay. So let me do this real quick. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. From Instagram, the Stalker Archery J, I can't see the whole name. If you are still on, please message me on Instagram. You just won the white cup. Eeny, meeny, meeny, miny, miny, mo. Jay Colley from Facebook, send me a message. You just won the orange. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Stop. Josh Nordwell from YouTube, send me a message. You just won their green cup. So if you guys could, email me at michael@elkcallingacademy.com with your name, your shipping address, and if you could remind me which color cup I just gave you so that way I don't send the wrong one, or if it doesn't matter. So, all right. We have about a minute left. I've still got a ton of questions and comments. So hopefully that helped you guys with... Okay, sorry, the autocorrect. Yes, your answer was exactly what I was looking for. Perfect. Okay, so hopefully this kind of helps you guys with kind of calling strategies throughout the different phases of the rut. We're down to about 45 seconds left on Instagram, so we are going to wrap this up tonight. I'm going to go through the comments, write down any questions that we didn't get into. Next week, we're actually going to go into solo hunting, and we will dive into some more of these questions. So, guys, thank you so much for tuning in tonight. I would not be able to do this without all of you. I appreciate all of your support. For those of you interested in the Patreon, I've made it easy. All you have to do is go to elkcallingacademy.com. That will take you right to the Patreon page. Great advantages in there. Appreciate you all tuning in tonight. Have a great week. We will see all of you guys next week on the next episode of Wapiti Wednesday Q&A, brought to you by Elk Calling Academy. Good night, everybody.